This is Corey Willis with PPEI, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
I'm Adam Blattenberg from Diesel World.
This is Dan, owner of Dan's Diesel Performance.
I'm Cass from Diesel Doctor of Tennessee, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the #1 diesel truck podcast on iTunes. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about Allison transmissions. Specifically, if you have one that's going out or has failed, what are your options? Do you need to go with a crate transmission? What about rebuild kits? What sort of upgrades do you need in them to create, either a really stout, like daily driving towing setup, or if you're going for more performance, what are upgrades you need to think about during that process? So we're going to be chatting with Holton from Alligator Performance. He's going to go through with us all the different options that are out there, all the different companies that have products and kits and everything like that. And we're going to look at which one could be best for your situation. So we know you guys are going to enjoy this podcast. We want to give a special shout out to Diesel World Magazine with race season. We're in the middle of the summer. They're out there covering a ton of different events, different builds and races and things like that. Make sure you go to dieselworldmag.com, bookmark the page, or pick up an issue in a store and check out what's going on in diesel. All right, let's get to the podcast with Holton and talking Allison rebuild options.
Holton, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm excited to have you on today and be able to chat with you about truck parts.
Hey, thanks for having me, bud.
We've gotten some questions over the last couple weeks on Instagram and Facebook, and I think it's transmission time in a way. People are towing their boats and trailers and things like that, and they're finding the weak points, whether it's on an older truck or even the newer ones. And I wanted to talk to you about Allison upgrades and kind of go through some of the questions you get on a daily basis, and what people who call an Alligator Performance are asking you guys if they've got a 01 to current Duramax.
Like you said, it is a season. School's out for the summer. Everyone's heading off to the lakes, heading off in the mountains and whatnot, and several other states for camping and just having a good old time with the families. And like you said, everyone's, I got this much power and it's not getting to the ground, or the FMS ones, like here in the Northwest, hey, I was pulling a pass and I went in limp mode, and what do I need to do? And the biggest thing I always tell people is, where are you at with it? What's your goals?
Yeah.
Anyone, even your builder, whether you get a full crate trans from us, BD, ATS, Suncoast, SDP, we always need to know, what you're doing with the truck, what's your goals for it, and what you plan on using the truck for. Because no one wants, anything ridiculous for something that they're daily driving or that they got in the family with.
Now, would you say that when Allison's starting to have an issue, and let's just say like 2001 to 10s, would the two most common things that people are going to see is, one, the temperatures are high, and then two, they're going to go into fail-safe or limp mode, and there's going to be a gear ratio code or something like that where they definitely know, hey, I need a transmission? Or can there be other things that maybe they don't need a transmission, it's just the cooler might need to be replaced, or there's something blocking the airflow or something like that?
Very rarely do I see, like the cooler's the culprit of the problem. The biggest thing is, again, power. For the 0105 guys, they kind of get the short end of the stick. Those original 5-speed Allisons in a stock form, they don't like to hold excess of, mid to high 4s for too long, especially if you're beating on it or working it really, really, really hard. The 6 to 10 guys can get away with a little bit just by doing a Transco Junior shift kit in it, and I've seen some people hold on borrowed time around 5 to 510 horse.
Gotcha. So it's right kind of in that range where if you do, say, a lift pump upgrade and a solid tune, you're probably going to be right at that breaking point on either year range. It's just how hard you are on the truck and how much the pedal goes down to the floor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the 01 to 10 guys, even lift pump, like you said, in a good built trans tune, you can typically max those out safely around 530 horse to the ground with 33s or, to stock size tires. And anytime you put bigger tires on the truck, you're just putting that much more strain on the truck or on the transmission itself.
That's something we've been hearing a lot lately, especially chatting with like Nitro Gear, is they've been talking about how important that is, and it's a very interesting relationship how the tire size, the gearing ultimately affects the transmission, and then we get to the point like we are now talking about, how am I going to upgrade my transmission? How much is it going to cost? what kind of upgrades do I need to put into it?
No, absolutely. Typically, from what I've seen and all the calls that I get from from coast to coast, people say, "Hey, my local shop quoted me this much. And, is that a good deal?" And then I have to turn around and ask the question, "What parts were you quoted? What kind of are they rebuilding it or are they building it?" And to some, there's some shops out there all they know is stock. So they'll quote someone $4,800 for a rebuild just for stock stuff and like a stock reman converter. And I tell them, like, you're located here. Hey, I got a buddy over here, or I can get you a full crate trans for $700 more. That's going to hold the power. It's going to have a better warranty, and you don't have to worry about hurting it ever again. And some of those people just
that's a good point.
Don't dig far enough into it. I guess some people, they're not that great at research. And, we're always happy to help people or at least guide them in the right direction, even if we can't get them the parts. I mean, I've been doing that I've been here almost 9 years in August.
There's a really good point about that, because I hear that from people all the time is they'll say, well, what's the fair price for upgrading my 5-speed Allison? This guy quoted me, $3,100 or $3,500, whatever the number is. It's like, well, what's in it? Is it a billet triple disc converter? What they do to the valve body? What kind of clutches are in it? Is there a DPM with it? I mean, all those things kind of factor into it. And unfortunately, if someone's not familiar with transmissions and the upgrades that are out there, and you're running a solid 450, 500, maybe a little bit over, that brand new stock rebuild is still going to have the same issues as what the factory one had, and it can turn into a couple rebuilds.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's kind of one of those, we always hear the same thing, not just in the truck world, but any other type of industry or hobby that you're into, 8 side-by-sides, guns and whatnot. So it's always you hear the same term, buy once, cry once. Mm-hmm. You got to pay to play. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, if someone quotes a guy, $3,800 for a stock rebuild, I would recommend that person, save the extra pennies, buy your time as much as you can and get an actual build so you don't have to do it again. No one hates fixing something, twice if they could have done it the right way just for a little extra money.
Now, if someone, I think that this comes up too, is say your transmission's out, you need one, and there's a ton of rebuild kits out there for Allisons, and there's also a ton of crate transmissions. How do you direct someone on whether to buy a rebuild kit or whether to buy a crate transmission?
As you well know, and everyone else knows, shipping a crate trans to and from, certain places, that gets expensive. And for some people, saving the extra $600 just in shipping alone, that's going to pay dividends for them to get a kit if they have a good, competent builder anywhere in their local area. I mean, I got guys on the East Coast as far as, a good buddy of mine in Virginia, down to Florida. I knew of one in Oklahoma, but I don't think he's doing it anymore. I knew of one guy in, the New England area. So I always try to, push people towards my friends if I can help them out, get them what they need to get into, and still save money without having to do it a second time. And you do have your, the other type of people that, they want the best warranty that, possible. They want something that's strictly plug and play because, they have a shop or they have a lift or their buddy has a lift and they can do it after hours, and they just need to get it in and out and done. And the downside is most crate trans take anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks, and that's before it ships. So now you're down about a month before you get that, where I can get you a rebuild kit, a good rebuild kit, either one of our private label ones from Suncoast, one of the kits from ATS or BD even, and get it shipped out the door that day, if not the next day.
Well, and it seems like the rebuild kits too, they've been around for such a long time, and it's such a popular thing in the Allison world, is they're prepackaged with basically the upgrades that are in a crate transmission. It's just obviously not assembled, but you're typically getting a converter, you're getting the clutches, gasket seals, valve body kit, all those sorts of things. So it's all in there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those guys that are like me, that are do-it-yourselfers. I mean, I built my first Allison back in 2012, back when the top of the line everything was, like a Suncoast 1056 or 1058, Red Eagle Alto clutches and choline steels, and that was top of the game or top of the line back then. You know, now you got the guys from BD, Suncoast, all those guys, and they're, as technology evolves, you know, so does everything else. Like, oh, what was it? I think it's called like the G3 clutches that's out there now.
Yeah.
People are putting the LML return springs and apply pistons in there because they come off quicker, and which is actually beneficial for the Allisons. And I saw that back in 2013. Mike sent me a kit to experiment with my truck, and it worked great. So just seeing how everything's evolved over time, I mean, these transmissions are holding pretty damn good power all the way up to, you know, the average guy that's looking for a 650 horse, and you don't need billet parts up until then either, which is beneficial because the Dodge guys get it worse. The second you the second you put a triple disc in there, you need a billet input. On Allison,
Yeah.
that stock input will hold about 900 horse. Every now and then I'll see a freak of nature fluke where a guy, you know, they say they're driving down the road, we don't ever know what they're doing, but, you know, hey, my converter locked, it didn't want to come unlocked. Next thing I know, I felt a really bad vibration, then all of a sudden I had nothing. I only had park. And he said he pulled his converter out, stock converter, and out popped the input shaft. I'm like, never seen that before. But, you know, I beat the hell out of mine when I still had my LBZ, a little over 700 horse on the stock input, and never once heard it.
I would definitely probably be the crate transmission guy, because if I tried to rebuild my transmission, I'd definitely have some extra parts, and I guarantee I would not have all forward gears when I did it.
I've actually been there before, back when I was still doing them, before Chris took over for me. Guy brings me a crate transmission, hey, I built it with your kit, and I have these parts. I don't know what I did. And I look at him, he's got like a spring return plate, 2 snap rings, a check ball, and I'm like, okay, put it on that table and I'll tear into it after work, because now I got to go through the whole thing, figure out what it was. And luckily it was just one of the check balls fell out of the Transco Junior. He went too far into the C2 hub and pulled out a snap ring that he shouldn't, and the return plate was off the C5 clutches. So luckily it wasn't anything catastrophic, or, you know, he didn't put it back in. It was just one of those, I saw it, I was like, okay, luckily this was easy. And he did everything else correctly, because he was actually talking to one of his buddies that actually built them, and he told him what to do over the phone and whatnot. And some people can do it that way. That's how I learned. You know, I was lucky enough to have people like Cam and Mike to help teach me the ways back then, to where I could learn all that stuff. And that's where I picked a lot up on it, you know, and trying to stay up on it as technology evolves. Better clutches and everything are coming out almost every year.
Yeah, it seems like even though the trucks, you know, they haven't been built in a while, it doesn't mean the aftermarket stops, and there's so many new materials for clutch packs and different things that are done. And there was a question that had come in, and I think the guy's definitely done research. He's read a lot, or listened to podcasts, and he hasn't done anything with the motor yet. I think it's an LBZ. But what his question was, okay, if I'm shooting for 600 to 700 horsepower, what would need to change if, say, I go to 750, 800, 900 horsepower as far as hard parts? So when someone calls in and asks you questions, what do you tell them is a good setup as far as hard parts, whether it's crate transmission or rebuild kit for 600, 700 versus now we're going 800, 900 horsepower or higher?
Before anyone goes into like the 800 plus mark, which is usually the range for a built motor, so let's just say we're talking to the average guy that has a set of compounds, about 700 horse towing with his truck. About the only real thing that I've seen people that need for a hard part is a billet C2 hub.
Gotcha.
I mean, like I said, the shafts are fine up to about 900 horse, and that's typically when some people need them. But even then, I've seen some people, just depending on how the rest of the trans is set up and how hard the converter locks, even then the stock ones can still last quite a while. It just depends on what you're doing with it.
Well, and also too, like at the point of billet shafts, would you just be doing like the input and the output? And I think there's a billet intermediate out there, but I'm not sure, when that would say be needed for a build. But most things on the street, maybe tops, billet input, output, and the P2 planet and hub at something like 1,000 or
I'd say
700 horsepower or something like that.
I'd say tops probably billet input. If I've seen people replace the output with the trans still in there. I don't recommend doing it because it's a pain to get the tail housing back on with the trans still in the truck, but I've seen people do it. Like I said, the only downside is whenever billet comes apart, like a billet shaft comes apart, it doesn't shear, it shatters. So like if you have a stock intermediate, it 9 times out of 10 it'll just ring off, twist, and cut clean, and then you don't have to worry about trying to find all the metal shards and then wrecking a case or wrecking another planet or anything like that. Like when a billet shaft comes apart, she explodes, and then you are best off like, hey, I just need a crate trans that's built for this. I just need it done. I'm not doing this again.
I was just thinking of this question for you, which I found that a lot of Duramax guys ask this, and that's, okay, if I do rebuild kit, crate transmission, how is the shift going to feel? Is it hard? Is it firm? Does it feel like stock? What should a built transmission feel like on an Allison? Now, I know it's a little different. Like in the Dodge world, they definitely behave different, and it's like each group of owners has a different expectation of what, the 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4 shifts are going to feel like. But in your opinion, what would you tell someone to expect when they buy a rebuild kit, or they're buying a $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 crate transmission from you?
Usually what I tell people, it comes down to the builder and how everything else is set up. Like I'll use my truck for an example. When I built mine, even with an experimental kit from Suncoast, a long time ago, the way I had everything set up, I could only see my RPM drop and hear the shift, but I never felt it. The only time mine acted naughty was when it was extremely cold out, because we're in North Idaho, and it would be extremely cold out. If I'm teasing the throttle, just cruising like 10 or 15 miles an hour, it would hang in first, and then it would kind of be aggressive in second, but out of that it was perfectly fine. But that was only cold. Normally what I tell people, if it's shifting really rough, you need to take it back to the builder immediately. Like I wouldn't recommend driving it anymore. They either need to go through, check out the taps, or if not, tear back into it and check all their clearances. Because if she's banging like really hard, you got something going on. It shouldn't be doing that. I mean, I've seen dozens of built Allisons that shift just like stock, if not smoother than stock. It truly comes down to the builder, in my opinion.
Now, after you get this transmission in, they're all going to run, or we want to make sure that we spend $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and we can see the temperature, the transmission temperature.
Mm-hmm.
How are you recommending an aftermarket cooler or a secondary cooler on one of these setups to keep the temperatures under control? Is heat still an issue on a quality rebuild kit, rebuild transmission, or crate transmission?
Typically what I tell people is Allison operation temps, and this is what I was told a long time ago, was 100 degrees above ambient. So if you're seeing like 210 and it's about 100, 105 degrees, you're fine. Like I said, if you're putting around town or you're in like bumper-to-bumper traffic and she's getting up there around like 210, 220, you need to pull over and let her cool down. Deep pans work to an extent. About the best stock OE replacement transcooler that I've seen that work real well are the ones from PPEI. They're a direct bolt-in. They're significantly larger than stock, and they flow a lot better than stock. The Allison guys, we don't have a lot of room up front between the grill and the radiator and everything, or the intercooler.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't really run dual stack transcoolers to an extent without getting really custom with it, and that's talking lines, bracketry, and everything. So we have to do like a lot of the Dodge guys do and put one either in the bed or, especially if you have auxiliary fans on it, like in the bed, and then you got a whole lot of plumbing and everything to do. And most people don't want to do that, and I get it. And that's why I always go to an aftermarket transcooler first.
Well, I guess it would depend on the build as well and how aggressive, say the whole setup is, and the use of it is to, if you're at the track and you're hot lapping it or something, or stop and go in Las Vegas and it's hot, it's going to run warmer. But it always seems like the questions we get are, okay, I'm ready for a built transmission, but what do I do with the cooler? Do I even need one? What temperature should I see? And it it's probably one of the most common questions, I think, regardless of GM, Ford, or Ram that are out there. So it's good to know that there's options if someone wants to, say go with a PPE cooler or, an auxiliary one or something, depending on the use of the truck.
Yeah, no, and like I said, it is that time of year. I mean, fortunately, we haven't really seen too many days in the 90s up here, but you got the guys, like you said, in Vegas, SoCal, Texas. Those guys, they always get beat on during the summer, and they need it more so than most people. Like I said, if that converter isn't locked and it isn't, coupling and moving fluid the way it should, she's going to get warm pretty quick. Like I said, that's where the temps tend to creep up a whole lot more and a whole lot quicker. Like I said, I could be around here in the summer when I still have my truck, and up and down the road, she get pretty warm, but I jump on the freeway for about 20 minutes, and my temps drop significantly, by about 10 to 15 degrees. Like I said, you got to get that converter locked. You got to get that fluid moving in order to get it cooled down. That's when I say bumper-to-bumper traffic or slow moving and the converter's not locked. That's when temps are going to really creep up on you real quick.
Now, as far as on the LMLs, does much change with the hard parts that are needed, or even the power levels where you need to go, and maybe with some hard part upgrades, or is it still pretty much like, the 5 speeds, the LBZs, LMMs, where you're about, 650, 700, and then higher up is where we're going to billet shafts and other upgrades?
You're about the same breaking point for the shafts. The LML guys got a little bit better than the 0110 guys. I've seen some people hold it to about 530 on a stock trans with either an EPC fooler, BD's line pressure box that they have, or a trans tuning that really helps out, because the LMLs, they tend to kick down in pressure in between shifts, and on and on, off and on, off and on, off and on significantly over time can wear on it. Deviant came out with the EPC fooler, which gets rid of the solenoid in the valve body that kicks that, or the triggers that kicks down. BD has their pressure box that also works really well. And if you have EFI Live or Easy Link tuning, you can also do the same thing within trans tuning, and it helps significantly as far as the line pressure issues are concerned. But still, the breaking points for those are around 530, 540 from what I've seen, real world scenarios.
It is nice how there's so much technology and experience and options out there for Allison transmission upgrades, and they're really stout transmissions. In stock form, they're probably the best.
They're phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's like the technology's there, and guys like yourself, and then in the aftermarket with all the different options, you're not stuck. And you can build it as as crazy as you need to, and depending on what's done to the engine, or there's affordable options that are out there. And I know we're going to have some Duramax fans out there listening to this podcast that they're going to have specific questions for their build. If they want to talk to you, or they want to talk to the guys there and ask questions, what's the best way for them to reach out, whether it's calling or messaging or email or social media, to get in contact with you guys and customize it?
I mean, they're more welcome to email in. The phones are on whenever we're here. Like I said, we got 5 guys that are all pretty sharp. We're all in the same room, so if you're talking to one guy and he doesn't have the answer, but the next guy does, we just stick our head around the corner or just message each other and get the answer real quick that way. Like I said, we all have our fortes, but we all know enough to be really dangerous. I mean, we did change our live chat option up to where it doesn't go through like a dedicated live chat server anymore. It actually directs you to our Facebook. And we have 5 guys that monitor that, the whole time while we're here. Monday through Friday, 7 to 5 Pacific time. And, if one guy picks it up and it's a question he's not familiar with, he'll pass out to one of us or tell one of the other guys to jump on there, and we'll pick it up. I said, cool. I mean, if you get a hold of us, you're in good hands, and we'll get you taken care of the best we can.
Well, it's something with these kind of builds. It's each truck's personal and used differently, and even though there are kits out there and there's stages of transmissions that are really common and fit, most uses, it's really helpful to be able to reach out to a place, talk to someone who knows the information, but then also like yourself, like you've had one, you've built one, you know how they should feel and shift, and behave and the questions you're going to ask as an enthusiast who drives one of those trucks. So it's always cool when we, talk about what do I need for the build, and these questions we get from listeners is be able to direct them towards someone who can help them. And, you can look up and say, hey, this kit's in stock, or this transmission is going to be a week or week and a half. This is exactly what it's going to be, and be able to get them what they need to be happy with the truck for however they're going to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I do have a common question on is, what stall converter do I need? That's probably the biggest one I always get asked. And I ask people, what are you doing with the truck? What's its purpose? And what's your turbo setup? About 90% of the time, the average guy just needs like a 1800 to 2000 stall converter. Unless you're running like a really big turbo setup, or you're drag racing or pulling it, then that's when you need like the 28 to 3 to 3200 RPM stall. Your average guy with a stock turbo, 18, more than fine, especially if you're towing with it. For the guy that likes to have a modified or single turbo, they're still fine with 1800 stall from what I've seen. And like my setup with the S475 over stock on a stock motor, 18 to 2000 was more than adequate. I played around with the Suncoast 1058, and it was phenomenal for drag racing. I wish it could have been a little tighter, or I wish I went with something a little tighter for just daily driving and cruising around the freeway, because I want to say that was like a 2 to 2200 stall. But it was great for drag racing. It always comes down to ultimately what you're doing with your truck and your turbo setup, and that's always going to dictate stall, in my opinion.
And I think that's where people reach out to you or listen to this podcast. They're going to have questions on that, because they might be running, a modified drop-in VGT charger, maybe compounds, maybe a bigger single, and that's where all the options that are there in the converter world and in the kits or crate transmissions, can be customized, and they get what they need and have that response or help spool, a bigger charger, maybe based on the converter stall.
Absolutely. I mean, because if you can't get the RPM up without the converter coupling and get on top of the turbo, she's just going to be a dog.
And that's never fun.
No.
I mean, it's cool to chat with you, about these questions that we've got, and there's so much information, and I'm sure we could do a ton more podcasts about, what clutch material should we use, what kind of, what are the clearances and all those sorts of things. But I know this is definitely going to help out the people who asked us, and the Duramax fans that we have listening that are right in this position. They need, transmission, don't know which way to go, what it's going to cost, what parts they need, and you're able to shed some light on it.
Yeah, no, and I always tell people, don't be afraid to ask a question. I mean, there's no such thing as a dumb question except for an unasked question.
That is very true. Awesome. Well, thanks again, man. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with us and get these questions answered.
Yeah, no problem, bud.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, if you have any questions about what we talked about on this podcast, make sure and hit up Alligator Performance. Just go to alligatorperformance.com. You can message in, call, or find them on social media. They're on Instagram, Facebook. More than happy to answer any questions you guys might have about building your Allison. And also don't forget to check out an issue of Diesel World Mag, or go to dieselworldmag.com, bookmark the page, and see what's going on at events, product reviews, builds, tons of different things. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.